All right, so yeah, it's great to be back in Dublin. It's nice to see so many familiar faces and new faces as well, which is very important. So I'll tell you guys about long bio, longevity biotech. Long bio is a new term that we're hoping to coin and popularize that kind of, we hope will do what the term synbio did for the synthetic biology field, make it sort of a thing that investors and founders and people need to know about and need to have a thesis on. And how long bio is the apotheosis of medicine, this means achieving its final form or becoming divine or godlike, the ultimate form of medicine. So I'll tell you about my own background in health span capital, the long bio sector, diagnosing some of biopharma's R&D decline, geroscience and the holy grail of medicine, as well as immune age bio, and Prospera and Vitalia, which many of you were attending this winter. So who am I, Sebastian Brunemeier? I look myself in the mirror every morning and ask this question, who am I? But for the purposes of this talk, I'm a longevity scientist by training. I've been in the field over 10 years. Credit to Aubrey, actually, for helping me get my start in the field. And I've done research at the lab bench, pipetting at many of these institutions. I was one of the first employees at Apollo Health Ventures, which is today the largest aging-focused fund in the world with $200 million under management. With Apollo, I launched Samsara Therapeutics, which is the most clinically advanced autophagy enhancement company. So we have drugs in the clinic that work for neurodegenerative diseases, we hope. Then I co-founded Cambrian Biopharma, which is one of the largest multi-asset aging-focused companies based in New York. And today, I help run HealthSpan Capital with several partners. We're investing in longevity biotech and regenerative medicine. And I also lead Immune Age Bio, and we're rejuvenating the immune system. We'll get into that. So here are some of the organizations that I work with or advise. I'll call your attention to the Longevity Biotech Fellowship. This is run by my colleague Nathan Chang. It is the largest organization of founders, investors, and longevity scientists, and you can join and attend regular conferences, et cetera. So HealthSpan Capital, we are, as far as we're aware, the most active investor in the long bio space. We've done 30 deals in the last 2 years, hoping to do many more. So you can see some of the beautiful faces of my colleagues and some of our advisory board, who's actually in the audience. They've been at all of these various institutions, pharmas, biotechs, venture, academia, et cetera. Here's a snapshot of some of our portfolio companies. This is not a complete list. Go to our website, healthspancapital.vc. If you're planning to launch a company, please get in touch with us. And if you want to invest, you can go on our website and press the button. Our minimum check size is only $5K through our angel list entity, so you can get exposure to the long bio field that way. So I'll give you an overview of the ecosystem. So my colleague Nathan built this website called longevitylist.com. And he keeps track of the companies in the space, investors, job postings, et cetera, clinical trials, so go check it out. Here's a snapshot of the sort of database page, so keeping track of all of these companies and the hallmarks of aging that they're targeting. You should also sign up for his newsletter, Longevity Market Cap newsletter, which is the largest in the world. So here's some of the investors and company builders in the space. This list is growing by the year, but not quite fast enough. Here's what I call my social proof slide, or my appeal to ethos, some of the smart cookies in the space. You guys know Thiel, Bezos, Spology, but many others on this list. So we definitely have sort of a brain trust of people and companies, including big pharmas, that are entering the space. Here's a snapshot of some of the companies in the space. There are a couple publicly listed ones that are sort of semi-longevity, but not really meeting the standard of longevity by our definition, which is a little strict. But many of these privately held companies do meet that definition, which is basically lifespan extension across species. So Michael teed this up perfectly, talking about some of the large players in this space. Altos has some very sophisticated people, as well as Calico, and they've each raised over $3 billion plus in capital. Altos's seed round was the largest seed financing in history, $3 billion out of the gate. And then you have some smaller fundraisers like Cambrian and Retro. So there's a problem in biopharma, which is there's a decline in R&D productivity, and we should try to figure out why this is, and maybe long bio can offer a solution. So my friend Jack Scannell, who's actually a colleague of Michael, together they coined a term called Eroom's law. Eroom's law is the inverse of Moore's law, which is the exponentially increasing semiconductor processing power. We have exponentially increasing pharmaceutical development costs. And on internal R&D, biopharma is actually burning investors' money. So they're very inefficient on internal R&D, and they know this, which is why they're leaning heavily on external innovation, which is good for people like us who are building these companies, investing in these companies, but it's not so good for society because they have significant resources that these biotechs do not. So some good news. The work of Andrew Lo, professor at MIT, has shown that in the year 2000, the top 30 best-selling drugs, of them, only 13% were from academia or biotech. The rest were from internal pharma R&D. But if you go to the year 2018, the drugs listed in blue here, 80% came from biotech and academia. So this is an important shift, but the problem is we just don't have enough competent founders and early-stage investors because there's a lot of assets sitting on the shelf within academia that we need to spin out still. Some more good news from Andrew's group. The clinical trial success rate is increasing. And why might this be? He attributes it to more academic drug discovery, biotech spinouts, new modalities like gene therapy, and targeting diseases where we understand the pathology like monogenic diseases. And his thinking gave rise to a company called BridgeBio, which is this hub and spoke multi-asset company targeting rare diseases, which at the time it was launched were generally neglected by pharma. Now it's very popular in pharma. And so with Cambrian, we've attempted to do something similar, which is the BridgeBio model, but for aging and age-related diseases. So the silver tsunami, why is it so important to address the hallmarks of aging and slow the aging process? Michael spoke about this. It's demographics. Demographics are destiny. There's nothing we can do to produce more, say, 20-year-olds as of today. So if you go to the year 2010, the countries in red are those where over 20% of the population is over 65 retirement age. So just Western Europe and Japan. But if you fast forward to 2050, it's a sea of red. Pretty much the whole developed world is in this predicament. And no government has a credible plan to address this. So we know that aging is an exponential risk function for disease. Even if we cured cancer, all types of cancer tomorrow, on a population level, it would be, say, 3 to 5 years of extended population lifespan. So it doesn't really move the needle for this demographic problem. So the best approach, we think, is instead of the pharma model of extending unhealthy life a little bit at the end of life, which is very expensive, we want to extend the healthy years of life, health span. Pharma has historically been asleep at the wheel. So according to Jürgen Drews, head of R&D at Roche, one of the most sophisticated of the pharmas in Switzerland, he said, biotech is taking up what pharma is neglecting, targeting the root causes of disease. What could be more at the root of disease than aging itself? And David Baltimore, the president of Caltech and Nobel laureate, said regarding the biotech revolution in the 90s, pharma was asleep at the wheel, unable to understand the profound opportunities in molecular biology and unable to take advantage of them. To pharma's credit, I think they're a little faster on the uptake with long bio. Okay, so geroscience as a new paradigm. If you were to tell somebody in the turn of the 20th century that, hey, you know those set of diseases everyone's dying from right now, bacterial infections? Well, in a couple decades, almost nobody is going to die from those in the developed world. Nobody would have believed you. And yet, that's what happened. And so to use Aubrey's term, hopefully we can bring aging under medical control, this century. We can do that in part because of advances in the basic biology, the hallmarks of aging, the 7 deadly sins. Here's some of the underlying mechanisms that many of you know. This is a little out of date. There are probably about 100 interventions, genetic and pharmacological, that extend healthy lifespan in mice, and we just need to translate these into the clinic. Here's some of the quantum of lifespan extension of these various interventions. I am partial to heterochronic bone marrow transplant. I'm going to talk about that at the end. So this is probably my most important slide, which is when we make the case to investors or founders or governments or anybody, why will long bio be more effective? Why will it have a clinical success rate that is higher than the traditional pharma model? And part of the answer is, in the traditional pharma model, we're highly, highly reliant on these contrived, unrealistic animal models of disease. Jack Scannell has written in Nature Reviews Drug Discovery on this predictive validity of these models. So basically, when you have a really good model, like, for example, bacterial infection in mice, very quickly thereafter, you develop effective drugs for it. The way to basically have job security as an animal model of disease is to not work very well, like Mouseheimers, the amyloid beta mice or the tau mice. People keep banging their heads against the same wall and going nowhere. So a partial solution is, with long biodrugs, geroprotective drugs, we test them across species: yeast, worms, flies, mice, fish, et cetera. And if they extend lifespan and robustness across these species in a non-contrived, wild-type normal model of aging, that's much more likely to work in the clinic and to be a pipeline in a pill. So we'll talk a bit about one of my favorite interventions, which is bone marrow rejuvenation. So your whole immune system, it starts in your bone marrow, the hematopoietic stem cells, and it gives rise to the white blood cells, red blood cells, et cetera. And we're working on rejuvenating the bone marrow stem cells as well as T cells within a company called ImmuneAge Bio, which launched pretty recently, a little over a year ago. So I'll just very quickly go through some of these points in the interest of time. But if you're an investor, get in touch because we are raising capital. We're raising our second round now. So I already spoke about how aging is the #1 risk factor for age-related disease. We think that targeting the bone marrow stem cells is going to be really effective, in part because we can take these cells out of the body, rejuvenate them ex vivo, and then reinfuse them. And so you can see the HSC here is at the apex of this lineage of all of these immune cell types. And there's been a lot of interest, even revolutions, in cancer care, autoimmune disease, et cetera, by targeting individual ones of these immune cells, like T cells or NK cells. But what if we actually just rejuvenated the source of all of those various immune cell types? So some of the research that turned me on to this approach a couple years ago is the young to old bone marrow transplant field. So you can transplant young bone marrow into an old mouse, and it will live up to about 30% longer. It slows aging in every way that we check. It even enhances memory and learning, which I wouldn't have expected, a younger immune system enhancing cognitive function. And Aubrey has also, at the Lev Foundation, tested young to old bone marrow transplant under a similar paradigm. So we don't have clones. We don't have younger clones of ourselves, at least not yet. There are people working on that, to transplant bone marrow. So the next best thing would be to rejuvenate our own bone marrow, ex vivo and in vivo. So ImmuneAge is built on two platforms, two pillars. The first is stem supply, where we can achieve 1,000-fold expansion of HSCs. So the world record before was about 10 or 20x. This work comes out of Stanford and Oxford, and the team got 2 Nature papers on this. This alone could be a breakthrough in the bone marrow transplant field, where 50% of patients die on the wait list. They don't find a genetically matched donor in time. But for the first time ever, this expansion capability allows us to screen drugs in HSCs at large scale, because you previously couldn't get your hands on enough HSCs because they're a very rare and precious cell type. We've also developed a computational platform to classify old, young, and rejuvenated HSCs and T cells. And then the second pillar is age screen. So we basically look at various hallmarks of aging to rejuvenate these cells, to find cocktails that ex vivo and sometimes in vivo rejuvenate them. Right, so this is the basic overview of the computational capacity. We take various omics tools, we plug it into standard deep learning capability, and then we classify those cells. So we're developing 3 products right now. Sorry, the formatting is a little messed up here. The first is a small molecule, a pill, that rejuvenates the immune system. We published an analog of this in Nature Aging last year, and we've shown that it enhances immune function in cancer models, infectious disease models, et cetera. And it's very safe and well tolerated. This is convenient because it's a large market. You know, there are all kinds of neglected diseases all over the world, infectious diseases, where if we had a host-directed therapy that would boost immune function, that would be very helpful, especially if we have another pandemic, which is inevitable eventually, to have a pill that we could take to mitigate COVID 2.0. The second program is ex vivo rejuvenation. We take out your cells, we rejuvenate them in a dish, we put them back. And the third is HSC expansion, where we increase the number of those cells, which is the #1 factor determining bone marrow transplant success. So some of the work we've done so far, we published one of these molecules in Nature Aging. This is an enhancer of mitophagy and mitochondrial biogenesis. This is, to our knowledge, the most potent rejuvenator of the immune system yet published. We've developed a platform to test a lot of these different mechanism of action rejuvenators ex vivo, and our collaborators have published 2 Nature papers on the HSC expansion work. So a bit about our team. Lucky to have these folks around the table, over 100 years combined drug discovery expertise. Many of these folks are world leaders in immune aging or drug discovery, and I've launched 3 long bio companies with about $500 million equity value in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's led by myself and Joseph Christensen, who's a new addition to the team. I've already told you my background. Joseph's background, probably even more impressive than mine, studied medicine in Copenhagen, PhD in stem cell biology at Harvard. He led commercial strategy at Novo Nordisk, one of the largest pharma companies today, at least in Europe, leading some of their cell therapy strategy. He was chief BD officer at Stem Medical, which is one of the first companies in the world to get commercial approval for a mesenchymal stem cell therapy. In his free time, he launched a in vitro cultured meat company. He spent 5 years at McKinsey, working with a lot of the big pharmas, even though we like BCG here, of course. BCG, way better than McKinsey, believe me, tremendous company, tremendous. Beautiful slides, incredible. And then he worked with me at Apollo Ventures, where we met, and he's an advisor to HealthSpan Capital. So some of the deep domain experts, Nicola Vanini, who's a world expert in HSC metabolism and cancer metabolism in Switzerland. Adam Wilkinson, who, dare I say, is the world expert in HSC expansion at Oxford, where we met. Some of our advisory board won't go into details. You'll recognize some of these faces. I'll call out Thomas Ebeling, who is the former CEO of Novartis, the Swiss pharma, who's personally invested in the company as well. Some of our kick-ass operations team and some of our consultants, you'll recognize some here. So what clinical indications should we go after with immune rejuvenators, small molecules, and ex vivo immune reboot? Long-term, everybody on Earth can benefit from this. This is why I'm doing this. It's not for the money. It's because I think that HSC rejuvenation is the lowest hanging fruit, most likely to work intervention in the near term. In the near term, also, we can go after respiratory tract infections. So this is the 4th leading cause of death globally, and it's neglected in the developing world. Another application is patients receiving chemo. So when you get chemotherapy, it kills off your fast-dividing cells. The fastest dividing cell type in your body is the HSC. And so the dose-limiting toxicity in chemotherapy is myelosuppression or anemia. So we could go up to a higher, more effective dose in cancer patients if we could set aside or bank some of those HSCs before they get the chemo. Then the HSCs dodge the bullet, and then we reinfuse post-chemo, preventing the long-term negative effects and accelerated aging of chemotherapy. Bone marrow transplants, also a large area. We can improve vaccine response in the elderly. There are many other immune suppressive conditions. And there's also data in the literature that HSC aging drives atherosclerosis and dementia and many other age-related diseases. So what is the long-term vision? We aim to have this simple outpatient procedure. It takes a couple hours, where we basically mobilize the HSCs in the peripheral blood with an injection of 2 molecules. This is routinely done all over the world in bone marrow transplant setting today. We apherese them out. We expand them with stem supply. We rejuvenate them with these cocktails. We reinfuse as needed, and we bank for later because no one's getting any younger. And the analogy to take with you is the ship of Theseus. So it's this ancient Greek myth about the concept of continuity. If you slowly replace some of the wood in the ship, when do you declare that you have a new ship? And that's what we aim to do, is gently, gradually replace the immune system. Okay, so I'll finish with a little bit on Prospera. So many of you are familiar with Prospera. You were there at Vitalia in the winter, but I'll give you a little bit of an overview. So there's no regenerative medicine hub, one sort of Silicon Valley equivalent where you can go and get the highest quality regenerative medicine and longevity drugs today. It's a very slow process going through the traditional FDA, EMA pathway. So what if there were a way we could do faster clinical trials and get this early data to take back into these larger markets? And that's what Prospera offers. Prospera is based on the island of Roatan, which is a Caribbean island off the coast of Honduras. Gets over 1 million visitors a year for scuba diving. It's got the second largest barrier reef in the world after the Great Barrier Reef, and it's a beautiful tropical island. Here's the master plan for the design of this city. Some of these buildings are already under construction. And why do we need an alternative jurisdiction for longevity drug discovery? Well, I'll just quote Thomas Jefferson, good old TJ, my favorite founding father, where he said, "Was the government to prescribe to us our medicine and diet, our bodies would be in such keeping as our souls are now." Very poetic. And you just look at the data that Michael brought up, and others about the actually declining life expectancy in the United States. So we should probably think about this a little more. So Vitalia is a sort of layer 2. It's a community within Prospera, this new jurisdiction. And by the way, if you want to know more about Prospera, you can search Eric Brimmen, the co-founder of Prospera, and the Network State Conference where he spoke, Balaji Srinivasan's conference. And he'll give you an overview of the merits of this approach. Anyway, so within Vitalia, we wanted to create the frontier city of life. Here's another cool graphic. So this is kind of what it looks like. We had, for 2 or 3 months, we had some of the world-leading thinkers in various topics come and hang out with us and really get to know each other. And it's kind of like a conference, but even longer form. So you get to know these people on a more personal level. It builds tighter sort of connections for founding companies or investing. And it's really a lot of fun. So you can see some of the snapshots here. We had hundreds of scientists, founders, investors, and thinkers living together. And some of them are still there, actually. And so this will be an ongoing thing. We organized a series of conferences, longevity biotech, startup societies and crypto cities, AI and tech progress, et cetera. And some really prominent, famous people were there. Was happy to have Aubrey there for quite a while as well. Here's some snapshots of some of the conference events, and then some of the prominent folks who came. There's me and Aubrey. And you can check out the first conference that we organized. Many of you were there. You can see this list here. So we'll be doing that regularly. Okay, so I'll finish with these quotes. Craig Venter was one of the first people to sequence the human genome. He was competing against the US federal government. And he said, if the 20th century was a century of physics, the 21st will be the century of biology. Steve Jobs of Apple said, the biggest innovations the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. So with that, thank you very much for listening and looking forward to the conference.
Great, Sebastian, thank you. There's no time for questions, I'm afraid, so the agenda's moving around a little bit, but I'm sure people will catch you at the break. Thank you very much. Great, thank you, guys.